It was Thanksgiving night in Savannah, Georgia. The kind of night where the air smells like roasted turkey, cinnamon pies, and family tradition. The dining room glowed under the chandelier. The table stretched long, covered in a crisp white cloth plates gleaming in the candlelight. Every seat was full. Every voice was warm. Or, so it seemed. I stood at the head of the table, glass in hand, ready to toast. I thanked them for coming. I spoke about gratitude, about family holding each other together when life got hard. And then, a flash of red. Cold wine exploded across my face, dripping down my collar. The sting of alcohol in my eyes. The sharp gasps from my family. Ethan, my older brother. He smirked like a man proud of a kill shot. "You think you're better than me, Michael. You stole what's mine." I didn't move. I didn't yell. I dabbed my face with a napkin and smiled. Because what Ethan didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this. For months, I'd collected the truth, his truth, on paper and recordings and numbers that don't lie. And tonight, in front of everyone, he'd just given me the one thing I didn't have yet. A room full of witnesses. If you've ever watched family loyalty shatter into something colder, hit subscribe. Because what came next wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And it would change Thanksgiving forever. My name is Michael Lawson. I'm 46 years old, an architect born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. People say I have the patience of a saint. I call it calculation. In my line of work, you learn that a building only stands as strong as the foundation you lay. The same is true for family. If the ground shifts beneath you, if the trust cracks, everything will collapse sooner or later. For most of my life, I believed my family was solid. Sure, we had disagreements, but nothing that a Sunday dinner and my mother's peach cobbler couldn't fix. That was before my father died. Dad left me in charge of the family's small but valuable real estate business. Not because I'm the oldest, that's my brother Ethan, but because I'm the one who could keep it running. I've spent years keeping the properties in shape, paying off debts, making sure Mom had everything she needed. I never thought that would turn me into the villain in Ethan's story. He saw my responsibility as theft. He saw my caution as greed. And every time I said no to his reckless ideas, the cracks between us deepened. I didn't push back, not yet. Sometimes the smartest move in any fight is to wait. Wait until the other person shows their true face. Wait until the mask slips so you know exactly where to strike. And on Thanksgiving night, under the warm lights of our dining room, Ethan's mask was about to come off. My brother, Ethan Lawson, is 3 years older than me. And if I'm the foundation, he's the wrecking ball. Ethan's the kind of man who talks faster than he thinks, who signs deals before reading the fine print. In high school, he was the quarterback, the star everyone cheered for. But in real life, the game doesn't end after 4 quarters, and Ethan never learned how to play the long one. After Dad died, Ethan expected to step in, take over the business, and live the kind of life he thought he deserved. Big house, fast cars, vacations that last longer than his attention span. But what he inherited instead was debt. Debt he'd helped create. So he came to me. At first, it was small favors, covering a missed payment here, bailing him out of a bad investment there. Then the numbers got bigger. $10,000, $25,000, always with a promise, "I'll pay you back, Mike. You know I will." He never did. And every time I refused him, the look in his eyes changed. A little more anger, a little more resentment. Like I was standing between him and something that was rightfully his. I could see the storm building. The late-night calls. The sudden visits. The way he started asking questions about Mom's will, about my accounts, about the properties I managed. Still, I stayed quiet, because sometimes you need to let a storm break before you can rebuild. And I knew Thanksgiving would be the perfect night for Ethan's storm to hit. Savannah has a way of holding on to its history. Cobblestone streets, oak trees draped in Spanish moss, and houses older than the country itself. Our family's real estate company was part of that history. Dad built it from nothing. Just one rundown property he fixed up himself, then another, then another. By the time he passed, we owned 20 buildings across the city. But history also holds grudges. When Dad named me executor of the estate, it wasn't about favoritism. It was about trust. He knew I could keep the business steady, pay the taxes, protect Mom. Ethan saw it differently. In his mind, I'd stolen what should have been his by birthright. At first, the tension stayed under the surface. Polite smiles at Sunday dinners, forced small talk at family gatherings. But I could feel it the way his eyes lingered on the guest list at the company events, the way he flinched when I signed the checks. Then came the whispers. Aunt May telling me Ethan had been asking about hidden accounts. A neighbor mentioning he'd seen Ethan talking to a shady property developer downtown. Little pieces of a bigger picture. I started documenting everything. Every text, every email, every casual comment that didn't sit right. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew one day I might need to protect myself. And Thanksgiving night, that day finally came. I just didn't know how far Ethan was willing to go. Thanksgiving night in Savannah has its own rhythm. The air is cool but not cold. The streets quieter than usual. Inside Mom's dining room, the table was set like something out of a magazine, polished silverware, crystal glasses. The smell of roasted turkey drifting through the house. Family filled the seats. Mom at one end smiling through her usual holiday nerves. Ethan across from me wearing a suit that probably cost more than his rent, pretending everything was fine. I'd almost believe it myself if I didn't know better. I stood, glass in hand, ready to give my toast. It was tradition. Every year, Dad would say a few words about gratitude, family, and the things that last longer than money. This year, it was my turn. To family I began. To the memories we've built and the ones still ahead. That's when it happened. Ethan reached for his glass, not to drink, but to throw. A sharp splash, cold wine hitting my face. The shock of red against white. Gasps rippled around the table. Mom froze. My niece ducked under her chair. Ethan's voice cut through the silence. You think you're better than me, Michael. You think you can control everything. I wiped my face slowly, setting my glass down without a word. Not anger, not even surprise, just confirmation. The storm I'd been waiting for had finally broken, and everyone in that room had just become a witness. The wine dripped down my face, soaking into my shirt. The room held its breath. Every eye at the table was on me, waiting to see if I'd explode, shout, or throw something back. But I didn't. I reached for my napkin, wiped my face slowly, and set it neatly on the table. No rush, no raised voice. I wanted Ethan to feel the weight of that silence pressing in on him. You done? I asked quietly. Ethan smirked, mistaking my calm for weakness. Not even close. I studied him the way I'd study a cracked foundation, finding the weak points, the hairline fractures no one else could see. You just made your biggest mistake, I said. My voice was steady, but every word landed like steel. Mom tried to intervene. Michael, please. I raised a hand without looking at her. This is between me and Ethan. Around the table, my cousins and uncles shifted uncomfortably. Nobody wanted to be here anymore. Good. They'd remember this night. They'd remember who started it. Ethan leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. "What are you gonna do, little brother? Cut me out of another deal?" I smiled, small controlled. Something like that. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to threaten, because I already had the first piece of my revenge in place, and by the time this was over, Ethan would wish all I'd done was cut him out of a deal. The silence didn't last long. It never does. Aunt May was the first to move, fumbling for her napkin as if wiping the table could erase what had just happened. Uncle Robert muttered something about bad timing and reached for his coat. At the far end of the table, my cousin Daniel whispered to his wife, eyes darting between me and Ethan like he was watching a slow-motion car crash. Mom's hands trembled as she tried to refill her water glass. It spilled over, running across the tablecloth, mixing with the wine stains. Her voice was tight, almost pleading. "Ethan, please. This is Thanksgiving. We're family." Ethan laughed a short, bitter sound. Family. "Tell that to him," he said, jabbing a finger at me. "He's been running this family business like it's his personal kingdom." I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I let the others fill the air with the nervous chatter, awkward excuses, and the scraping of chairs as people made their exits. Every movement, every look was another page in the record I was keeping. My niece, little Chloe, peeked out from behind Mom's chair. Her eyes were wide, confused. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the anger. That I would remember. By the time half the table had cleared, Ethan was still standing there, glass in hand, chest heaving. And me, I was calm, watching the room empty, knowing that every witness leaving tonight would have the same story to tell. Exactly the story I wanted. Ethan didn't wait for the room to settle. He pushed his chair back with a sharp scrape and took a step toward me. The smell of wine and cologne hit me before his words did. "You've been stealing from me," he said loud enough for the stragglers to hear. "Skimming profits, hiding assets, don't think I don't know." I stayed seated, elbows resting lightly on the table. "Interesting accusation," I said. "Any proof, or are we just throwing liquids and lies tonight?" His jaw clenched. "You think I'm bluffing. I've seen the books. I know about the offshore account." That caught my attention, not because it was true, but because it told me exactly where he'd been looking and how much digging he'd already done. Mom's voice wavered. "Ethan, stop. This isn't the place." He ignored her, leaning closer. "You think Savannah's too small for the truth to get out? I'll ruin you, Michael. I'll tell every investor you've been cooking the numbers." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching the last few relatives pretend they weren't listening. Then I smiled. Slow, deliberate. "Go ahead," I said. "But remember, lies have a way of leading back to the person who told them." For the first time that night, Ethan hesitated, just for a second. But I saw the crack in his confidence, and I knew exactly where to strike next. I finally stood up. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to make Ethan take half a step back without realizing it. "You've been digging through the company books," I said, my voice even. "That's interesting, because only 3 people have accessed me, our accountant and—" I let my eyes linger on him, you. A ripple of unease crossed his face, quickly masked by another smirk. "What's your point?" "My point," I said, "is that in the past month I've had 2 separate alerts about unauthorized logins. Times when I wasn't online." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, swiping to a set of screenshots. Each one showed login attempts, IP addresses, timestamps. "Recognize any of these locations?" I asked. The room was nearly empty now, but the few who remained leaned in, sensing the shift. Ethan's smirk faltered. "You're bluffing." I set the phone down in front of him, then prove me wrong. He didn't touch it, didn't even look, and in that hesitation I saw the truth plain as day. I leaned in just enough for only him to hear. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how deep you've been in my accounts." When I straightened, my smile was back. But inside, I'd already moved on to the next step because I knew tonight's little scene had just given me all the leverage I needed. By the time Ethan stormed out, the dining room looked like the aftermath of a storm. Wine stains on the tablecloth chairs, pushed back half-finished plates, cooling in silence. I stayed behind, moving slowly, collecting my phone, my glass, my thoughts. Every detail from tonight was already filed away in my mind. Expressions, words, who stayed, who left. I wasn't just remembering, I was building a case. The first call I made wasn't to Mom. It was to Robert Hayes, our corporate attorney. Voicemail, perfect. I left a short, deliberate message. "Robert, we need to meet. Urgent. I have evidence of internal breaches, full documentation. Call me first thing Monday." Next, I opened my laptop at the corner of the table, pulling up company security logs. IP addresses, login histories, flagged transactions. It was all there, just waiting to be organized. By morning, I'd have a digital trail that would make Ethan's denial impossible. I could hear Mom moving in the kitchen, her voice low, probably on the phone with Aunt May. She didn't come back in. That was fine. This part wasn't for her. I poured myself a fresh glass, not wine, just water, and took one slow sip. Revenge wasn't about shouting across a table. It was about patience, precision, letting the other person think they'd drawn blood when in reality they'd just given you the perfect opening. And tonight, Ethan had handed me a gift wrapped in crystal glass and Cabernet Sauvignon. Saturday morning, Savannah was quiet. The kind of stillness you only get after a storm, whether in weather or in family. I left the house early, not to escape, but to move. Action was the antidote to anger. First stop, First Coastal Bank. I'd known the branch manager, Linda, for years, long enough that she didn't need to ask why I was there. We went straight into her office, and I placed my laptop on her desk. "Linda, I need you to run a forensic review on these accounts," I said, opening the folder of IP logs. She scanned the screen, eyebrows lifting. "These aren't your logins." "No, they're Ethan's. Or someone working for him." She didn't waste time. Within minutes, she was printing transaction histories and flagging suspicious activity. Each page was another nail in his coffin. From there, I drove across town to Robert Hayes' office. The parking lot was empty. It was Saturday after all. But I slipped the evidence envelope under his door with a note, full documentation. "Meeting Monday. Prepare termination protocol." Back in my truck, I checked my phone. No messages from Ethan. Good. The longer he stayed quiet, the more he'd think he was safe. I took the long way home along River Street, watching the water move slow and steady toward the ocean. Revenge wasn't about speed. It was about inevitability. And now the tide was mine. Monday morning came with crisp November air, the kind that wakes you up before your coffee does. By 8:00 a.m., I was sitting across from Robert Hayes in his downtown Savannah office. The evidence stack sat between us, thick enough to cast a shadow on his mahogany desk. Robert flipped through the pages slowly, his expression tightening. "This isn't just unauthorized access," he said. "This is grounds for criminal charges and corporate removal." "Good," I replied, "because I want both." We spent the next hour drafting the first wave of formal motion to suspend Ethan's access to all company accounts pending investigation. It would hit his inbox before lunch, and the board of directors would receive their copies minutes later. But I wasn't stopping there. From my briefcase, I pulled out the second file, a full month's worth of internal memos Ethan had accidentally ignored, each one documenting late payments to vendors and missed project deadlines. Patterns that showed negligence. Patterns that destroyed trust. Robert smiled thinly. You're not just cutting him out. You're burying his reputation. That's the point. By 11:30, the paperwork was filed and Ethan's company keycard was flagged for deactivation. I pictured him arriving at the office, swiping his card and hearing the door stay locked. Let him stand there in the cold, wondering how the tide turned so fast, wondering why I was smiling. By 1:00 p.m., the calls started. First from the office manager, then from Ethan himself. I didn't answer either. By 1:15, my voicemail was full. Ethan's voice went from angry to pleading in a matter of minutes. Michael, what the hell is this? You can't just lock me out. Look, let's talk. We're brothers. By 2:00, he showed up at my house. I watched from the study window as he pounded on the front door, his suit jacket hanging open, his tie crooked. The same man who'd thrown wine in my face now stood there shouting loud enough for the neighbors to peek through their blinds. I didn't move, didn't open the door. Instead, I pressed record on my phone and documented every word. You think you can humiliate me, he yelled. This company's mine just as much as yours. Then quieter, almost too quiet for the mic to pick up. I'll ruin you, Michael. You won't see it coming. By 2:30, a patrol car rolled up. Not my doing, Mrs. Kelly, next door, must have called. 2 officers stepped out, spoke to Ethan, and eventually walked him back to his car. He drove off, but not before giving my house one last lingering glare. That glare told me something important. He wasn't just angry, he was scared. And scared men make mistakes. I was ready to catch every single one. Tuesday morning, I was in Robert Hayes's office before the blinds were even open. The Savannah skyline was still painted in dawn colors, but I wasn't there for the view. Robert slid a fresh folder across the desk. Board meetings tomorrow. We have enough to remove him permanently. I opened it. Inside was the motion for full termination of Ethan's partnership, financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempted intimidation. Every accusation backed by time-stamped evidence vendor complaints and the recording from my front porch. This will pass unanimously, Robert said, but you wanted more. I nodded. Cutting him out of the company isn't enough. I want him unable to touch anything with my name on it. Robert leaned back. Then we filed a restraining order alongside the termination. Professional and personal. That way any contact becomes a legal violation. By noon, the paperwork was ready. I signed each page, slowly feeling the weight of every signature, not just as ink on paper, but as the final bricks in a wall I'd been building for months. Like any architect, I knew a strong structure isn't just about what you add, it's about what you remove. And removing Ethan was the demolition that would save the foundation. When I stepped out into the street, the air felt lighter. The city moved around me, busy and unaware that tomorrow an entire building in my life would come down. And once the dust settled, I could start rebuilding. The courthouse steps in downtown Savannah felt colder than they should in early December. Maybe it wasn't the weather. Maybe it was the weight of watching the final wall come down. Inside, the board members filed in one by one, their eyes avoiding Ethan's. Robert sat beside me, our evidence boxes lined up like support beams holding up the case we'd built piece by piece. The session began. Robert laid out the charges, every unauthorized login, every questionable transaction, every threat. Ethan's lawyer tried to patch the cracks, but the structure of their defense was already compromised. And when the recording from my porch played, silence filled the room like dust after a collapse. The chairman called for a vote. 7 hands went up, none stayed down. Effective immediately, Ethan Lawson's partnership was terminated. In the adjoining hearing, the judge signed the restraining order without hesitation, sealing off every entrance Ethan might try to use, professional or personal. As he walked out, he didn't look back. No parting words. Just a man stepping away from the ruins he'd made himself. Robert leaned in. It's done. I stepped outside, feeling the Savannah air hit my face. For months, I'd been reinforcing the foundation of my life brick by brick while Ethan tried to tear it down. Today, the demolition was complete and the ground was finally clear. Now, I could start building something new. Christmas Eve in Savannah came with the scent of pine and the warm glow spilling from porches along the street. Inside my home, the dining table was set for 12 friends, neighbors, and the people who'd stood by me through every step of this fight. No empty chair for Ethan. No cracks in the room's foundation. Just laughter solid and steady. John carved the roast while Aunt May told one of her stories, the kind that made everyone lean in and laugh until their eyes watered. The Wilson kids built towers out of blocks near the fireplace, giggling when they fell and starting again without frustration. I caught myself watching them, thinking how rebuilding a life isn't so different from building a house. You clear the debris. You lay each new brick with care. And if you do it right, it'll stand stronger than before. After dinner, I stood to make a toast. Last year, this house felt like it was falling apart. This year, it's the most solid place I know because of the people inside it. Glasses clinked, and in that moment, the walls seemed to hold not just the sound, but the trust that had been rebuilt here. As I sat down, John leaned over. You look different tonight, Michael. Lighter. I smiled. That's what happens when the foundation's finally strong again. If you've ever had to tear something down to make it stronger, you know what I mean. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stick around. There's always another build.